Thank you for clicking on our Bitcoin Saturday video where we're chill because it's Saturday. Okay, so we're going to chill and look at some Bitcoin charts. I want to start off this video with a little tip, and that tip would be not to trade Bitcoin on the smaller time frames, anything below a daily or a weekly, unless you are a very seasoned trader with Bitcoin in general. Tip I want to give you is to actually not look for divergence, but to look for a very significant divergence before you take a trade. And that would be, as you can see, this is a very good example. We actually in the past came way down from our all-time high, and we've created this kind of structure here, and this is our basing out structure. Now, if we just pull up the MACD, let's zoom in a little bit so you can see it. We can see that we had this low on the MACD cross, and this gave us some kind of bounce. You could have played this bounce, made a significant amount. It looks like about 30-40%, 30%, I think. But as you can see, we fell back down after touching a line of resistance. We fell all the way back down to 15,500, where then we saw another curl up. And right here, you could have considered this a significant divergence and took this as an investment. You could have considered it here, took an investment. And overall, you're looking for areas like this to place buys. This is a significant divergence. Why? Because this reading on the MACD at its low is around 2,900, and this reading up here is around 792. That's a minus. So we can consider that a big difference, right? This is how much difference is there. Whereas even though this bounce here did have a flat divergence, we can see that overall we could tell because the divergence is not up towards the center line, we are going to see that come down for another dip. Doesn't mean you can't play this, make your money. It just means that this is not going to be the next bull run in Bitcoin. Tip on the weekly is you want to be paying attention for when Bitcoin does a divergence like this. It comes out, gives you an oversold reading on the weekly, and then we do not go back to an oversold reading before we get the next pop higher. And what you can look for is you can mark the previous resistance or support that actually became resistance. You can mark somewhere along here and say, okay, if I get a solid close above this line, then I can see this as an investment for the future. So, and what we can do is just look at what happened if we would have done so. So we saw a cross on the MACD right around here, but if you looked at the daily, we knew that this would fade because the divergence was not very significant. It needs to come down and find a more significant divergence on the daily. And as this passes through prior resistance, that is telling us that there is now momentum to the upside. You can place a buy somewhere around $20,000 and just hold because you know that this move is going to produce a bigger bounce. And the good part about this was if you just zoomed out and you drew this long-term wedge that we had going on for like a couple years, we can see that we actually saw a break out of this wedge, a retest, and that is another signal that we want to move higher right around that daily divergence, right around this weekly divergence on the RSI. That isn't the most significant, but it doesn't have to be as significant on a weekly. If it is there on the weekly, then you can sense that there is going to be some strength. It passes through the center line here, right on this bar here. So you could have bought around $20,000 and held this thing confidently. Now, before we talk about these bars here, I just wanted to tell you this thing has crossed on the weekly. And what do we see right above us? We see a divergence. Sure, it might not be the most significant of divergences, but what did I say about weekly divergence? We pay attention to every single one that happens. So even though this is a reading of 2041 and this is only a reading of 1750, that's still a significant divergence because it is on a weekly time frame. We saw the confirmation to the downside. We saw a break of what we've been drawing out here, which is I drew an expanding wedge and a rising wedge as well, which we broke out of. And I believe that we could see some sort of little retest maybe just this week before we see a plunge downward. We have a ton of indecision bars. Okay, we had no idea what we wanted to do on the week of August 21st. And then on the week of August 28th, we actually looked like we wanted to extend to the upside, possibly get that retest. We didn't fully get it, but we did see rejection around our 200-day moving average and the other moving averages. But this line of support is kind of your line in the sand right now. Okay, once we break that, we are going to see massive downside. And the first point that I wanted you to pay attention to is prior resistance, 18,745. And the main area I think it will for sure get to 100% is 16,466 when this support here breaks and we drop below the 50. far as our last weekly bar, we have a complete indecision bar as of today. We still have a full day and a half left on this, so we could see some sort of reaction. But I overall believe that we do need to see some kind of retest upward, probably not on this weekly bar. Most likely that will start early next week into the CPI. I'm going to go over stocks and things around the CPI, what theories I have that are coming down the pipeline, what kind of catalyst could shake up the market, because it looks like, based on seasonality, we actually could see some sort of bounce this week, even a little one next week before we get that rug pull. So I switch over to a daily chart on Bitcoin and we look at all these bars. We notice we have not broken below this support line here, which is a big deal. And if we just take a look at the MACD, we had a crossover here. We actually wanted to come down for another dip, possibly to break this, but we rejected that confirmation, which tells me that there actually possibly could be some type of upside into previous resistance, into a test of our broken triangle here, and then we will see some sort of downside. Thing to note that is different from the weekly is we have broken every single trend line. So once this breaks, all of your algorithms are going to tell all of the market to sell this thing off. And I believe that that is going to happen in the near future. But tomorrow's video, I'm going to go over when I think that that is exactly going to happen. I previously thought this would happen with the CPI, but because we aren't seeing that bounce and because of seasonality, we could see a bounce this week. I believe it might be a deal where the market shrugs off CPI and then we go into the next catalyst that possibly shakes up the market. Overall, how I see Bitcoin playing out in the future is by Monday, we will see some kind of dip back into this, if not just a wick, and then we will see some sort of reaction up because the CPI might come in right in line with expectation and people might shrug that off thinking, oh, the Fed is not going to raise rates. I believe that the Fed actually, this is a little hint, they actually could raise rates this month and shock the entire market. And that could be the catalyst that actually causes the crash of 2023. After this consolidation, we popped up higher. We have 2 points of reference here. We have an expanding wedge. We have a rising wedge. And we did break out of that. So all I'm looking for is some kind of actual retest of this broken wedge. And then I am confident to say this is going to go down. But in the meantime, if this does decide to break this line and close below there, and we see no kind of recovery after it does so, very quickly after it does that, we are going to see this thing start to have some major downside, and the crash actually could begin this week. So I know this is confusing, and this is just another guy telling you it could go either way. I'm telling you my theory is that this is going to actually go up and test. But I just want to warn you because crazy things are happening in the market that if this gets a close below here and does not see any kind of recovery and we see a close on a weekly basis, then you can bet on everything that this thing is going to go down to its next level, at least testing its 50 on the weekly, which is somewhere around that $24,000 amount. So my overall thinking is this week, if we do cut this and we dink our head on that 50 and then we see a reaction off of it, I would still see this as holding it as support. We are getting a lot of indecision from Bitcoin. Hopefully we can see some direction in the future. I will just switch over to the monthly and show you that we actually did get across and we're looking for that double dip. So it just tells me that actually a monthly divergence could set up, meaning that maybe in the month of September we come up a little bit and then we end closing this, and then in October we see some kind of big dip into our resistance, or I guess our support area that we talked about last week. If you want to, you can go look at that in our previous Bitcoin video. It's on my channel. And then I think we will see some sort of reaction from there, possibly a rebound all the way up to maybe even $100,000. So we'll get to that when it comes, but for now, just note, if it breaks this support, we're in a lot of trouble, but we could see that retest in the short term before we break that support. Well, Mr. Bruce here is telling me that he wants to go to the park, so I hope you guys have a great weekend. Subscribe if you want to see my Sunday video, because I'm going to go way in depth with the market and what I think is going to happen this week. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Peace.